Okay, we're going to find out if Pete can figure out how to stitch two videos together, because that video got stopped in the middle. I had to move inside because I ran out of battery power. I didn't realize I'd been using it unplugged for so long. And then it got the camera got turned off or something. I don't know. But I was talking about Jason Robard's performance, and when you look, especially in the scene he does with Diana Rigg, but in all the other scenes, when he's not talking, his acting is fantastic. He's a great film actor, even though, as I said, he didn't like film. His face when he's reacting is incredible. But when he is saying those lines, and I don't know if maybe it's just he didn't like Shakespeare or he didn't have the affinity for it, which I find strange because he was a man of the theater, as I was saying. But maybe he was just more modern. You know, you think of Jason Robards, you think of Eugene O'Neill and performances like that, you know. And then in movies, of course, he plays like the heavy, like the, he's great in Sergio Leone movies where he plays the big railroad baron or something. So that is a flaw, but not as big a flaw as I think John Gielgud is, just not being an interesting Caesar at all. He's Caesar, I am Caesar, Julius Caesar. You know, it's that kind of old style acting, and I think it's not good, and it's one of the reasons people don't like Shakespeare very much. Heston, pretty good. I was going to have these pictures. I have some pictures, some stills from that. You know, the wigs and the costumes don't do anybody any favors in this movie. It was an independent production with not a top drawer director. Heston, in later years, he was involved with like producing and stuff. He would go on to play Mark Antony again in Antony and Cleopatra, like a year or two later. That is also on YouTube. And I'm not going to be watching that. I watched a few minutes of it, and Heston directed that. And it also does not look like it's well directed. I only watched a few minutes of it. So Heston really doesn't have much to complain about when he complains about the director of this movie, because when he got his hands on Shakespeare, he didn't do much better. But they're kind of stilted direction, but there are some great performances in it. Let's see if I can get back to my... Oh, I lost all that stuff. Okay. I'll be right back. By the way, the version I watched is on YouTube, and it's a remastered. It was remastered a few years ago. It's not that popular of a movie that people want to make sure that everybody gets to see it. But here's. All right, I'm getting really frustrated with these phones today. This fucking bullshit. Oh god damn it! All right, fine. Here. Keep flipping, and it's going to do it again, watch. Okay, but that's Robert Vaughn as Seska, or Casca, whatever. And the guy in the middle plays Cassius. And then Jason Robards is on the left. He plays Brutus. Cassius, the guy who plays Cassius, I got to look this up, because he was also really good. He's not... that well known as the other actors. He probably, to most people, he is, but not to me. He was Richard Johnson played Cassius, and Casca is who Robert Vaughn plays. They're two of the other conspirators, but you could kind of see from that picture. I'm not going to show it again because my phone wants to flip out. And here's Heston in this one. You know, you can see those dumb robes on top of robes, very, very stiff material. You know, really no kind of consistency, colors. Everybody's outfit looks like it's just tossed together. That's not really good filmmaking, in my opinion. Here's the cover. He did kind of have a cool helmet for the cover, but the battle scenes are really like everything. The way this movie is directed is muddy and I don't mean muddy like realistically, like mud on everybody, like a realistic movie, but just kind of not well directed, not well composed. The shots aren't well composed or anything. The lighting's not that interesting. and the helmet looks cool in the poster, but it doesn't look cool in the battle scenes. None of them look like they're fighting. None of them look like they're really outfitted for war. But the thing about but despite all those flaws, what I really wanted to get to was how fantastic this play is. Even it really comes through, even with all those flaws, and even with the spotty performances. You could argue about this person or that person, but it does convey the story, which not every film of a Shakespeare play does. They did understand the story, and it's a political story. And it's very relevant, not in any one-to-one way, but you've got these guys who are concerned about power, concerned about losing their own power, concerned about losing their liberty as rich males by another rich male having more power than all of them combined. And Mark Antony, Charlton Heston's character, is allied with Caesar. He's not one of the conspirators. He's a good friend of Caesar's, an ally of Caesar. Some of the conspirators want to kill him, want to kill Mark Antony along with Caesar, and Brutus wants to not do that. He wants to be restrained. He wants to do as minimal damage, as minimal crime, as minimal murder, mayhem as possible, which he eventually decides would be to just kill Caesar. And their idea is they're going to kill Caesar, then they're going to quickly form a new government and quickly explain to the people why they did it, why it was in everyone's best interest, and then put everything back together again. This is their plan, and you can imagine how that works out. It's the way it works out every time somebody gets assassinated. It's chaos everywhere. Makes things worse for everybody. But there's fantastic scenes of political machination. There's fantastic speeches, political speeches that are given after the assassination of Caesar. The conspirators bring in Mark Antony and they say, look, this is done. It's like almost gangster stuff. It's like, look, this is done. This is the decision we made. It's over. You need to help us now, and we'll make it clear to the people that you had nothing to do with this. And then we're all gonna be friends again, right? And he's like, well, yeah, that's how it's got to be. I see how it is. And so they, and not knowing the story beforehand, I mean, when I read it earlier and stuff, I didn't know how this was going to go. The play's only half over at this point, remember. And I can't think of another one offhand. I can't think of another Shakespeare play where the main character, it's allegedly the tragedy of Julius Caesar, right? And he dies halfway through it. Romeo and Juliet isn't the tragedy of Mercutio, who dies halfway through it. But Caesar's ghost, Great Caesar's ghost, is, as Perry White would say, is part of. He hangs around as a ghost. There is a supernatural element to this, just as there is to Hamlet and to Macbeth, where there's like it's all set in motion with some supernatural portents. Like you've got the witches in Macbeth, you've got the ghost in Hamlet, the ghost of Hamlet's father. And this one you've got the soothsayer who beware the Ides of March, which is the 8th of March. So he tells, and there's another soothsayer too, played by Christopher Lee. So there are psychic clairvoyant people saying, the bad things are going to happen starting on March 8th. And just like every soothsayer in all of fiction never changes anything. Anybody who's ever seen the future in fiction never has avoided any disaster. There's either two things that happen: the soothsayer, the truth teller, the Cassandra says, hey, this bad thing's going to happen, and they go, oh, bullshit, and the bad thing happens. Or they go, hey, this bad thing's going to happen, and then the person, I will definitely avoid that happening by doing this. And the thing that they do always leads them to the outcome that they're warned against. So that's just the nature of clairvoyance in fiction, I think. Oh, it is starting to rain outside, so it's a good thing I came in anyway. Right, so the crux of the play is the center of the play. It is such a strong center of the play. From it starts, the first third or so is the planning and getting Brutus on board with this assassination and setting the tone and everything. And there's assassination scene, very brutal, and discussions afterwards and how they try and put everything back together. Then Brutus comes out and addresses the people. They bring out Caesar's body, and they're like, okay, this is where we're going to put everything back together, because people are freaking out. People are freaking out everywhere in the city. It's total chaos. Caesar was murdered. No one knows what's going on, so they know they gotta get control right away. So all the people want answers. The vox populi, the voice of the people, right? The people, just the hoi polloi, the mob of Rome. There, could go anywhere, and Brutus comes out, and he's like, "This was a terrible thing that had to be done, and it's over," like he said to Anthony, "and we're going to come together as a nation, and we're going to move forward, and we're not going to speak ill of Caesar. We just had to take the step because he was going to become a dictator," and he gives this great speech, this really great unifying speech, and you're thinking, okay, everything's cool now. And they go, and now Mark Antony is going to talk, and he is going to bring out Caesar's body, and he's going to eulogize Caesar. And Mark Antony comes out, and he's promised, remember, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to reconcile. And he gives this speech, which is one of the greatest speeches, the greatest political speeches ever given, one of the greatest soliloquies ever given in Shakespeare, or by definition, any other play, where he starts out with, he's talking about Caesar. It's like, I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The good that men do is often interred with their bones, and the evil that men do continues after them. And he's talking about how honorable, he's talking about these honorable men, Brutus and everyone, and these are all honorable men. It's starting to build, and he, and he's playing it on paper. He's playing it just like he said he would. I said, I will praise you guys, but then the crux is in, and he's really building up how great Caesar was and what a terrible crime this is, without actually saying any of those words. And you can see the conspirators are backing away, and they're like, we better get out of town. And he totally turns the crowd around, and it's 100% believable how Mark Antony does this, how he turns them on a dime. They were all set to be calmed down and accept that this was over and move on, and then they're in a rage for the death of maybe whipping them up, and he goes, by the way, here's Caesar's will, and let's read his will. And in it, he's like, in the will, I don't know if it's, I guess it is a real will. Yeah, he reads out, and he says, first thing, everybody's getting, Caesar decided to split his fortune among every Roman citizen. You all get 75, whatever, dinar, whatever. Who knows what that is? Maybe $7,500, I'm guessing. Everybody gets that. Plus all the orchards that Caesar owned along the banks of the Tiber. He gave those to the people, so now you can go enjoy those with your family. And because Caesar was so generous with his own property, they're now public property. You can enjoy them. You can pick fruit. You can relax. You can wander through the woods, whatever. And he goes, and that's what Caesar did for us. And look what we did for him. And then so they're in a rage, right? They're thrown up. They're so angry, and Mark Antony lets it go, and then people go to mob, and then all the conspirators are suddenly confronted with the reality of their own actions, and they flee. The city riots. They burn all their houses. They burn all the houses of the conspirators down, the other senators. And they flee to the country, and they flee in different directions. They gather later, and there's this great little aside, but with Mark Antony right after, where he's like, "Well, I said what I had to say, and now we're just going to see where events take us. He riled up the crowd, but he's actually a better politician, a better tactician than anybody else, because he realizes that he can't control convince. All he could do is he could set them in one motion, whereas the conspirators thought, we're going to tamp this down. We're smart. We're the senators. We're the leaders of this society. We're gonna run it the way we want, and everybody's gonna, all we have to do is a little song and dance. Whereas Mark Antony is like, no, this is chaos. I unleash chaos. The conspirators would have been better if, in their own minds, if they had unleashed chaos. If they had thought that's what they were doing. But no, they were convinced that they would be able to control the narrative after they killed Caesar, and they weren't. And Mark Antony succeeds here because he kind of just steers the river a little bit. Like, I'm going to turn the mob, and the mob is going to go after these people, and then we'll see what happens. Fuck it. We'll see what happens. Because he's angry that his patron, his great friend, Caesar, was murdered by them, and he's willing to roll the dice. Whereas the other conspirators, I should say, not the other conspirators, thought they knew what they were doing, but they didn't. And nobody ever does know what they're doing. So maybe the person who's the better leader, the better politician, is one who knows he can't control it. He can kind of push it one way or the other and just ride it. So that's how I think of it anyway. Then there's a scene pretty later on where Octavius returns to Rome. Octavius is the nephew of Caesar, I think, his heir apparent. So now he's going to become the next Caesar, Augustus Caesar. And this movie's played by Richard Chamberlain. And there's a scene with Mark Antony and Richard and Octavius. I think it's Octavian. Anyway, it's going to be Augustus eventually, the 8th month, August. And he's looking at the will again. Mark Antony is the will that he read out to the people, and he's like, we got to make sure we get a cut of this. We got to skim off this. So you see, he's no saint either. Just in that little aside, I really love that moment. He doesn't say it quite that way, but he's like, don't worry about the 7,500 for everybody in the orchards. We'll get our piece. Don't worry. And so then the action moves to the countryside, to the field of battle. There's a great scene with Cassius and Brutus, where they fight. They're fighting amongst themselves on each side, on his side, because it's falling apart. They've all managed to get out of the city, or some of them have been killed. The main two get out of the city. Portia, Brutus's wife, Portia, kills herself, I think, it's not clear to me. I'd have to look it up, but she either kills herself or she self-immolates, so she won't have to face the mob or whatever. But anyway, she's dead. Brutus is very sanguine about this. This is another great Jason Robards scene. You can see the pain in his face, but he won't allow it to affect what they have to do. And Cassius is more brokenhearted about Portia than even her husband was, and he's like, just forget it. And then they fight over tactics and stuff. They decide again to be friends, Cassius and Brutus. I'd covered a lot of the play. I hope not so much that you don't want to watch it. You really should. You can watch that version. Other versions online, you can read it. It's a great read, too. There's many good versions of it. I recommend it highly. So much better than I remembered it. And it was never one of my favorites, but it is a really, really good play. I give you that. Then the last thing to talk about is what I started with, the preface to Shakespeare, published in the year 1768 by Samuel Johnson. And where's my... Can you hear the rain now? Good rainy day to talk about Shakespeare. Oh, well, I guess it's not going to open on. I put some notes in it. What I noticed about it's about in the version I had. I have the Gutenberg.org preface to Shakespeare. It is about 65 pages long, and it is amazing. I guess it shouldn't be amazing that Samuel Johnson, like the greatest intellectual of the 18th century, right, was so smart on Shakespeare, but it struck me how much he gets into the 60 pages that people are still promoting as new stuff. He really understands what's great about Shakespeare. It comes up all the time in books like, Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human and all this stuff, but it's all there in Samuel Johnson's article. He said it first. He said Shakespeare was the person who figured out, or who gave us characters, high characters, noble characters, low comic characters, all these extremes of human emotion, but presented them to us as normal people, like the normal people we see in our own lives. That's the genius of Shakespeare, is he brought them all into your own space. Everybody, the great characters in Shakespeare seem like real people, and that was apparently new, and it seems to have gone over John Gielgud's head, but I'm probably going to get in trouble for some of these complaints about Gielgud and all that, but everybody has their prejudices from the time we were born. Samuel Johnson, I wanted to pull this up because I bookmarked some stuff. Samuel Johnson also makes a couple other good points about Shakespeare that prove how there hasn't been that much improved understanding of Shakespeare from this time. And he was writing only like 80 years after Shakespeare's death, 80 years after Shakespeare's heyday, I should say. Probably have that wrong, but 1780. Yeah, no. Oh my God, I'm so bad with dates. Anyway, I'll have to look at that again. 1768. So 1668 would have been 1668. Okay, so 150. Like Shakespeare died in like 1603, right? So 1603 or 4, something like that. And when did he quit? Or that's when he quit. He only lived like 2 years after quit. He retired from the stage at 52, and he was dead at 54. So there's speculation about what, was he sick? What, did he have syphilis? It's usually what comes out. So 170 years later. Oh, hell, how long? Okay, I guess I'm not going to be able to get this. There's a problem getting my feed open. Preface to Shakespeare. Okay, I pinned 7 comments. All right. I'm really just 4. No. I don't think anybody's listening at this long. So, okay, like here's one quote from Johnson's introduction. Shakespeare is above all writers, at least above all modern writers, meaning writers of the 18th century, the poet of nature, the poet that holds up to his readers a faithful mirror of manners and of life. His characters are not modified by the customs of particular places, unpracticed by the rest of the world, by the peculiarities of studies or professions which can operate but upon small numbers, or by the accidents of transient fashions on temporary opinions. They are the genuine progeny of common humanity, such as the world will always supply, and observes an observation which will always find. His persons act and speak by the influence of those general passions and principles by which all minds are agitated, and the whole system of life is continued in motion. In the writings of other poets, a character is too often an individual. In those of Shakespeare, it is commonly a species. Okay, so what he's getting at in that passage, there was one more I wanted to read though, but this is the reason why Shakespeare's so universal. This is why you can make movies that are like Coriolanus, which are set in set in the 1940s, or Ian McKellen's Richard II, which is set in fascist Italy, and they still work. They actually work even better in modern dress. Because it's just the situations, and that is not always the case with every writer. And here's something else he says, which is quite prescient. I say prescient just because I'm in my ignorance. I've believed other writers when they've claimed these ideas of Samuel Johnson's for themselves without crediting them, but. Upon every other stage, the universal agent is love, by which power is good and evil is by which power all good and evil is distributed, and every action quickened or retarded. That's what he's saying the standard is. Okay. I think I saved the wrong section there. Okay, here's another interesting thing. Shakespeare has no heroes. Other dramatists can only gain attention by hyperbolic and aggravated characters, by fabulous and unexampled excellences of depravity, as the writers of barbarous romances invigorate the reader by a giant or a dwarf. And he that should form his expectations of human affairs from the play or from the tale would be equally deceived. Shakespeare has no heroes. I keep losing this. His scenes are occupied only by men who act and speak as the reader thinks that he should himself have spoken or acted on the same occasion, even when the agency of is the supernatural, or dialogue on a level with the dialogue is on a level with life. Other writers disguise the most natural passions and most frequent incidences so that he would contemplate them in the book will not only know them in the world. Shakespeare approximates the remote and familiarizes the wonderful. The event which he represents will not happen, but if it were possible, its effects would be probably such as he assigned. And it may be said that he has not only shown human nature as it acts in real exigencies, but as it would be found in trials to which it cannot be exposed. So what he's saying is that even if it's a fantasy, even if they're on a prosperous island, the people act the way you would act, or people you know would act in the same situation. He goes on to quite a bit more. My note-taking wasn't as good as I'd hoped, but another thing he talks about, and he talks a little bit about what he says are flaws. He kind of goes through them. Flaws of Shakespeare. There's one that was a big deal back then, which Samuel Johnson starts out talking about as a flaw, but then goes, continues to justify, and that's the unity of time and space, which was a big thing, which is a big Aristotle thing. For the action of a play should be unified in time and space. So the continuous act, if the play's an hour and a half long, it's real time, an hour and a half of what happens. It's unified place would mean there's one set, usually in the front of the temple, or in front of the palace of Thebes or wherever, and and it should not deviate from that. It should not skip over. And Shakespeare obviously does not adhere to that classic rule. His plays jump forward in time and space. Now you're in a castle. Now you're on the battlefield. Now you're in the tavern with Falstaff and his companions, and he says, and Johnson's defense of this seems pretty silly to us now that you would think of this, because we have movies and we have hundreds of years of plays since Shakespeare, but as Johnson says, when you read a work of fiction, you can go anywhere. You don't have to stay with the action in one scene. So he took those what maybe would be called literary effects at the time of jumping around in time and space, and put them on stage and to great effect. And another thing he does that breaks with tradition is the difference between comedy and tragedy. All Shakespeare's plays have hilarious scenes in them, have very funny scenes in them. Even Julius Caesar has a couple. Some have more, some have less. Most of the comedies have very dramatic scenes in them. There's really dark stuff that happens in All's Well That Ends Well, there's a couple parallel love stories. Is it All's Well That Ends Well? Much Ado About Nothing. With those fluffy comedy titles, they're mostly just throw-offs. Like, there's nothing in Twelfth Night that makes that play need to be called Twelfth Night. Much Ado About Nothing, similar. All's Well That Ends Well. You could switch those. Comedy of Errors could be applied to many different comedies. But so it's Much Ado About Nothing. The serious plot and the comedy plot are flipped. That's part of what makes it a comedy, because the serious plot, the young lovers who almost have their marriage ruined by evil third actor, in a sense, like that Othello is a doomed love story because of evil third actor. It's like the secondary plot, and the main plot is Beatrix and Benedict, who are have a lighter kind of story arc, and everything ends happily though, because it's a comedy, but there's very dark stuff in it, and the comedy and the Johnson really makes a point to discuss this, saying that Shakespeare mixed his genres, and there are plays that aren't even either one. I think they're called the problem plays, because people don't know how to categorize them. Is that why they're called that? I better stop. If I get that wrong, I'm going too far. I'll be right back. Okay, fortunately, I was fairly right. Shakespeare problem plays, this is from Wikipedia. In Shakespeare studies, the problem plays are plays written by Shakespeare that are characterized by their complex and ambiguous tone, which shifts violently between more straightforward comic material and dark psychological drama. Shakespeare's problem plays eschew the traditional trappings of both comedy and tragedy, and are sometimes cited as early predecessors to tragic comedy. So they're called problem plays because they don't fit the categories of tragedy or comedy. And usually they're cataloged as one or the other, but basically what they are, just, as long as I'm here. All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, Troilus and Cressida. Others also include The Winter's Tale, Timon of Athens, and The Merchant of Venice as problem plays, meaning they make a problem for... They're a problem for the scholars. They're not a problem for you. They're not a problem for me. They're not a problem for enjoying the plays. They're a problem for people who categorize stuff, which is interesting. Because when you hear that, you think, okay, this is maybe the problem plays. They examine human problems, or maybe they're a problem because for many other reasons. But no, they're just a problem because people don't know which box to put them in. But Samuel Johnson already solved that problem. Because Shakespeare, he says, mixes genres. He is, as I said in the first part of the first video, the Quentin Tarantino of the 16th century. He took from any source he wanted to make the most entertaining works he could. He was conscious of the audience, and he mixed genres because he knew all this stuff. Man, imagine if I put as the thumbnail the Quentin Shakespeare's the Tarantino of his time or something like that. How annoying that would be. So I won't do that. Let's see what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll just do this as part 2. Because if I stitch it together, it's going to be over an hour long anyway. So if anybody's interested at the end of part 1 and came to part 2, I thank you very much. I think you can see I could talk about Shakespeare all day. I love him. I wish more people would like him. But if you're interested in trying some, go easy on yourself. Pick a comedy. Pick Twelfth Night as a good one to start with. That's a really good movie, the Kenneth Branagh Twelfth Night movie. They're easy to follow. They're easy to follow when they're well directed by actors who know what they're saying. And there's many good Shakespeare movies. So I don't know if this is the one to watch. I watched it because Julius Caesar back to 1970 because I was genuinely curious to see what I would think of it after seeing it as a child and not understanding anything except that a guy named Caesar got stabbed to death very violently, and then people went after the people who stabbed him. That's all I got out of it at first. But again, just to wrap up, I was amazed at how good the play is and how it survived even all those flaws of that particular production. So that's it for Bookless Pete Reads Shakespeare for this week, and I thank you for your time, and we'll talk again.